Hours later, Chris noticed the boy still lying by the grave, unmoved. Curiosity and concern drove him closer. Yet, as he neared, shock gripped him. The boy appeared wretched, clothes in tatters, starvation etched on his face. Chris's heart ached. He resolved to aid him, earning his trust painstakingly. When the boy finally confided, Chris stood stunned. The situation was dire, far beyond his anticipation. Danger loomed, compelling Chris to dial the authorities. He prayed they'd reach safety in time. What prompted Chris's call to the police? What grim truth had he unearthed about the boy, thrusting them into peril? On a sunny autumn day, Chris strolled through the cemetery, heading towards his grandmother's grave. Even though she had passed away a few years ago, he made a point to visit her resting place at least once a week. Their bond had always been strong, and he cherished her memory dearly. Carrying a bouquet of flowers, a routine gesture, he intended to share updates from his week with her before heading home. He didn't anticipate staying long, but the day held surprises. While walking towards his grandma's spot, Chris noticed something peculiar. Although the cemetery was quiet, he wasn't alone. Other visitors paid respects to their loved ones, but one person stood out. Initially, unsure if his eyes deceived him, a closer look confirmed his suspicions. It was odd but not entirely inexplicable. Choosing to focus on his grandmother, Chris continued on his path, keeping his purpose in mind. You see, the thing Chris had seen was a little boy lying at a grave. It was a truly sad sight, but it didn't have to be weird. Maybe the boy had recently lost someone who was very dear to him, and he just missed them a lot. Chris thought about asking the boy if he was okay, but he soon changed his mind. The kid would probably be feeling really sad, and he didn't want to interrupt him or make him uncomfortable. By the time he had arrived at his grandma's grave, he had already forgotten about the boy, but that was going to change soon. He cleaned the gravestone and placed the flowers right next to it. He sat on the ground and told his grandma about what was going on at his job, at home, in his marriage, and in his daughter's school. He liked telling her about recent events in his life, and he believed that she could hear everything that he told her, even though she couldn't respond. After about an hour, Chris finished his story. He sat beside the grave in silence for a few minutes, just living in the moment. Then he got up and said, "See you next week, Grandma," to nobody in particular. He began his walk home, still completely unaware of what was going to happen next. He was not in a hurry, so he casually strolled through the cemetery. It was one of the biggest in his town, and it had beautiful flower fields going all through it. He took the same route back as he had taken on the way there and saw something that surprised him. The first time, he had not thought anything too weird of it, but now it was definitely not normal anymore. He stood still and looked at what was going on before him, thinking about whether he needed to do anything about it or not. He wasn't so sure. The little boy who he had seen lying on the grave earlier was still there, and he looked like he hadn't moved at all. As Chris looked at the kid, he couldn't help but feel a little bit concerned about him. Why was he still here? Chris still didn't want to approach him, but he didn't want to leave him alone either, so he sat on a bench close to the grave from where he could keep an eye on the kid. He was in no hurry and decided he would wait until someone came to pick him up. He still had no idea about the shocking discovery he would make. Another hour passed, and the boy was still there. In fact, he hadn't even moved for this entire hour. Chris would have thought that the kid was unconscious if he hadn't heard him softly crying the entire time. He felt really sorry for him and couldn't help but wonder who this grave belonged to. But even if he strained his eyes, Chris couldn't read the inscription on the gravestone from where he was sitting. He realized it would be a little weird to approach the boy and read the inscription, and besides, it was not his intention to pry. He just wanted to make sure the boy was all right. Chris sat on the bench for 2 more hours, and he was slowly starting to get cold. The boy still had not gotten up or even moved. Chris was at a loss of what to do. He felt like he needed to help the kid, but he didn't know how. However, he knew that he needed to do something. He decided to just approach the boy and ask him if he was okay and if anybody was coming to pick him up soon. He slowly walked toward the grave, not wanting to scare the boy when he heard something. The boy was talking to the grave, and what he said completely shocked Chris. He now knew for sure that he could not go home before this kid was safe and sound. But what should he do? He thought about calling the police, but he figured it would probably scare the boy, so he didn't make the call. At least not yet. You see, he heard the boy say, "Why did you leave me, Mommy? I'm all alone now." Chris couldn't believe this. He definitely needed to help him. He slowly walked towards him and asked him, "Hey kid, are you okay?" The boy looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. At first, the boy said nothing. He looked really sad and scared, and Chris was shocked to see the condition he was in. He hadn't noticed any of it earlier, but now that he saw the boy up close, he saw that he looked very pale and was wearing dirty and ripped clothes. The boy really did not look well. Chris didn't want to confront him about what he had heard him say to the grave because he looked so scared already. He thought of a better way to help him. "Are you hungry?" he asked the boy, and the boy silently nodded. Chris offered to get him a sandwich, and again, the boy nodded in silence. He still had not spoken a word to Chris, but luckily, Chris was a patient guy. He told the boy to wait there and quickly walked over to a convenience store that was only a couple of minutes away from the cemetery. There, he bought some sandwiches and a bottle of water. On the way back to the cemetery, he thought about what could be going on with this kid. A million theories crossed his mind, but soon enough, he would find out that none of them were actually true. When he returned, Chris was relieved to see that the boy was still there. He walked over to him and gave him the food and water he had gotten. For the first time, the boy spoke to him. He said, "Thank you," and Chris smiled at him warmly. "What now?" he thought to himself. "Are you here all by yourself?" Chris asked him, and the boy nodded again. "Do you have any family left? Is anybody coming to pick you up?" Chris asked again, but this time, the boy did not nod, nor did he speak. He just did not react to his question at all. Chris regretted asking this question. He wanted to earn the boy's trust so he could help him, and this wasn't helping. In an attempt to connect, he told the kid about his late grandmother and pointed in the direction of her grave, and to his relief, it seemed to work. The boy looked at him and asked, "What was your grandma's name?" Chris answered that it was Sarah, and the boy told him, "My mom's name is Jenna," as he pointed to the headstone in front of them. "That's a beautiful name," Chris responded, but he still had so many questions. He surely must have some other family left, right? Why would they let him walk around like that in dirty and ripped clothes all by himself? Chris felt sorry for the boy, and the more time he spent with him, the more worried he became. The boy, Tom, and his mom didn't have a place to live. When Tom's mom passed away, he was all alone. Luckily, Chris found him and called for help. Tom got taken in by a foster family and later adopted by a loving one. He grew up happy and healthy, always remembering his mom. What do you think of this story? Let us know in the comments section. Thank you.